That. I saw the in a while.
It's been a while. Welcome back.
Thanks.
Okay, we've got a lot to cover today, and I'm sure we haven't had anybody join us quite yet. But just for the future, for those that are going to be watching this, not in real time, but later, what we're going to be talking about today, I should stop and say, we've got Kelly Sanchez, the head of talent acquisition at DigiCert. For anybody who hasn't seen us before, thanks again, Kelly, for joining. We used to say you were, bi-weekly conversation partner, but these days we'll just say semi-regularly, semi-regular.
I know I need to get better at it. I'm sorry, you guys. Yes, as you can
I don't think this is on
my fault. It's my fault. Don't bi-weekly.
Don't do that. Don't take that on. It's but you are a busy woman, and again, you're the head of talent acquisition at DigiCert. So anytime you come on, we're all, I think, fortunate that you make the time, and I really appreciate it. So what we are talking about today is what we consider advanced interview preparation tips for candidates who are going to go into a job interview. These are things that you're not going to find in a lot of places. They're not, necessarily obvious, hence why we're calling them advanced interview tips. I think this is going to help a lot of people, though, and how better to prepare for interviews. So that's what we're talking about today. Per usual, I've got to navigate to a couple of different places to make sure I can track the conversation live on LinkedIn. If you are joining us and you have questions about what we talk about today, feel free to drop them into the comment section. Also, feel free to like and share and tell other people they need to come and watch this. But again, we don't necessarily expect people to watch in real time. This is something that'll live forever afterward, right? So
absolutely. Do we want it to live forever? No, it's good stuff.
Sadly, whether we want it to or not, I think it probably will. Even if you delete it, somebody's got a copy somewhere.
Someone has it.
For blackmail purposes, obviously.
Yeah, well, good thing I did my hair and got ready for today. So let's keep the video.
All right. Well, Kelly, if you will lead us with just a kind of an intro question while I go and like I said, navigate to where I need to go. I will put myself on mute and be right back.
Okay. So hi everyone. So usually when we start our conversations, we have a question that I'll answer while Scotty's being IT support. So for this week, the question is going to be quite easy, but I think we're opposites on this one, if I recall correctly from when we worked together. So coffee or tea? I am not a coffee drinker, never have been. People think I'm so weird. Like, how do you do it? So my go-to is tea. I love tea. I actually have a refresher right now. Don't know if you can see it. There you go, Starbucks. But so it's my favorite. They should bring back the orange flavor that they had a couple of years ago. That one was my favorite. So that is the tough question for today, Scotty. Coffee or tea? I didn't give you enough time.
There's got to be a better way someday. I'm low tech at this point, but no. So, okay. Thanks again, Kelly, for doing that. And again, for those that have now joined on LinkedIn, looks like there's a few of you who are live with us. We're going to talk about advanced interview preparation. So for candidates to prepare for interviews, these are some of the non-obvious stuff that we found ourselves thinking about over the years. Thanks for joining. I've got the head of talent acquisition, Kelly Sanchez, for DigiCert. She is my semi-regular conversation partner here on LinkedIn Lives. And she just asked me my preference between coffee and tea. And that did surprise me, Kelly. I know you well. We go way back. I did not know that about you. Mm-hmm. I know you hate bacon, which I also think is I still think you're just lying about that, but
I do, extra bacon for all the bacon lovers out there.
That's it. I'm a coffee guy. Not that I don't care for tea. I just honestly, at this point feel like it doesn't do much for me. It probably feels like it's hydrating more than anything else. So yeah, I in some ways wish I wasn't as much of a coffee guy as I am. But there you have it, coffee for me. So
Yeah.
awesome. Well, hey, thanks again for joining. We've got a lot to cover.
Yes.
And again, for those of you who are with us live today, what we're going to talk about are, tips for how to prepare for an interview. If you're a candidate, how to prepare for a job interview. I guess I should be specific. And these are non-obvious things. These are things that we think are going to take your preparation to the next level. So again, for those watching live, we really appreciate you and would love to have you ask questions in real time. That being said, this is going to exist as a resource for the future as well. So if you feel like there's value here for anybody who's actively job seeking or thinking about making a move, please feel free to share it because that's the goal for us today. So how we're going to set this up, Kelly, is I think we've got this list we discussed ahead of the live. And we're basically just going to go down the list and talk about these ideas one at a time. So I'll go ahead and kick it off.
Okay.
So number one, and by the way, these are not in any particular order. We didn't stack rank these. But I think from a chronological standpoint, this one's a good one to start with. As an interviewer, we recommend when you jump onto a Zoom interview or you start an in-person interview, or for that matter, a phone interview, if the interviewer, the person that's interviewing you, if they don't ask you this question, you ask them, do you have a hard stop or another appointment at the end of our allotted time here today? There's some reasons as to why. We can get into that, but yeah, that's number one. Kelly, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good one just to make sure that you're setting expectation. You as the interviewee understand that, hey, like I need to focus my time with this individual, not going to go over, have to be mindful for it.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And to your point, it's a signal. So what we'll talk about a lot today are the signals that you're going to send as an interviewee, as somebody being interviewed for a job. And this is one of the first ones. It signals to the person on the other end that you're conscientious, that you're organized, and we'll get to, how to kind of tie that all back once we get through the end of this list. So that's number one. Okay. Number two. So this is such like a hack, quote unquote, right? But I think a lot of people, go into interviews thinking, okay, this is a test and it's a closed book test. I'm going to go in there without resources and just answer to the best of my ability. We recommend you write things down ahead of the interview and bring that with you. And on the note of asking if there's a hard stop, you can address like, hey, I'll be taking notes throughout this meeting, but you can bring a notebook with, the company's core values, their mission, their vision, whatever you expect might be important to them. I can tell you right now, if you're interviewing with Goldman Sachs ever, they'll ask you who's their CEO and who is, what's their stock price that day. So just write that stuff down and take it with you into the interview, because there's no reason why you shouldn't have, some notes that you can reference. Thoughts on that, Kelly?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's on that same note, and I know we're going to talk about it, you're going to have your interview questions prepared to ask the interviewee. So yes, absolutely. Write down anything about the company that stood out to you that you want to talk about or discuss in the interview. They're just good connection points. And again, you get nervous during interviews. We all do. So it's a good thing that you can have it there to reference as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. The best way to combat the nervousness that you feel is to be prepared. And there's no better way to be prepared than to actually have stuff written down ahead of time. By the way, do you know who the CEO of Goldman Sachs is?
What? No, I don't know, but no idea.
So I only say this. The only reason I know is because he's also a DJ. And as a guy who doesn't know anything about pop culture for the most part, like the fact that I know that, I think his DJ name is DJ Soul.
I'm going to have to look this up. Okay.
You have to look him up. Yeah. I think his name is David Solomon. Honestly, I don't know either, but anyway, DJ Soul, that's who I think it is.
DJ Soul. Okay. All right.
The CEO of Goldman Sachs. Okay. For those of you who are with us live, again, if you have questions, I've got Kelly Sanchez, head of talent acquisition at DigiCert. Her and I are talking today about how to prepare, and we're considering these advanced interview tips, job interview tips. So how to prepare for a job interview as a candidate. Okay, moving on to the next one on the list. Kind of on the same vein as the last thing, you'll also want to think through, we all get these questions. If you've done a job interview ever, you're going to get some situational questions. Tell me about a time when, right? So when you look at the job description and you see the minimum qualifications and or preferred qualifications, start listing out different scenarios of where you've accomplished that or where you've proven a competency around those qualifications and write them down. Again, prepare for tell me about a time when you had, a difficult conversation with a coworker and how you resolved it. That's a common question. Come up with some examples and have them actually written down. Thoughts on that, Kelly?
Absolutely. And I will say practice it. It sounds really odd and we don't want to hear ourselves talk or anything, but really write it down, have the scenario in your head. I can't tell you how many times I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to bring this scenario up. Then I get asked the question, I just go blank. So practice it with someone, practice it even with yourself. Like look at yourself in the mirror and talk out loud. It's awkward, but it works.
Totally. Yep. Again, the best way to prepare the best way to combat that nervous feeling we have in interviews is to prepare. And to your point, if you practice, you're going to take it to the next level. Okay. Next tip here is research who you're interviewing with, not just the company, but the individual that you're interviewing with, and try to, at minimum, you want to look them up on LinkedIn, but I would argue, try to find some other resources, Google their name, see if you can find any podcast appearances that they've done, any, interviews that they've done that were published online. You're just looking for as much information about, things they may have said publicly as possible. And ideally, you're going to try to figure out some personal connections as well. So maybe some stuff that you have in common. Kelly, you had an additional thought on this, when we were preparing ourselves for this live. What are your thoughts on this one?
Now I forgot what I said to you.
Well, I'm going to give you credit for it because you did say it, but if you can't find anything, ask the recruiter.
Oh, yes.
Like, what are they into? Because they're going to know and they're going to, you hope they're going to know. They may not know, but it's a good idea if you can't find anything anywhere else, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So like we said, trying to weave in the personal connection or what you might have in common with somebody, that's just going to let everyone's guard down and make it a more comfortable conversation. And if you can make a connection, again, the nervousness that people often feel in interviews, that's going to mitigate that a lot. All right. We'll do one more and then we'll make sure everybody knows who we are and what we're talking about.
And I'll just add, don't overthink it too, because I think people are going to get down this black hole of oh my gosh, I need to Google them. I need to find something to connect on. Everyone's different. You may not find something, but maybe you both went to the same college or sports or something else. I remember for one of the interviews I had, I'm a huge Shark Tank fan. So I follow Mark Cuban on LinkedIn. So the easiest thing that you can do is just scroll down to the bottom of the interviewer's profile, see who they're connected with and who they're following, and just be like, hey, and this is literally what all I asked. I was like, hey, I noticed you followed Mark Cuban. What do you like? And they're like, ooh, why did you ask me that question? I actually don't like him. I'm like, ooh, so it started the conversation. Yeah. And it was great to connect, but that's all. I didn't have to go ask this elaborate question. So keep it simple. So that's all I have to say.
I love it. That's great. All right. So again, for those of you who are live with us right now, we are discussing what we consider to be advanced job interview preparation tips. I'm with Kelly Sanchez, the head of talent acquisition at DigiCert, and we are open for your questions. If you have questions about this topic, feel free, or comments for that matter, feel free to drop them into the comments here on LinkedIn. But all right, moving on to the next one on the list. So I mentioned it earlier, but I want to repeat it again now. When we're thinking about advanced, not basic interview tips, we're really starting to think about the signals that we send. So everything that we've talked about up to this point is about sending signals. Yeah. And I think this tip is really about how you're answering questions and the signal that you send when you answer a question. Because the example is, it's a simple one, right? But why are you looking to make a move? If the fully transparent, honest answer to that question is, I want more money, or my boss is a total jerk, or I just need a job, right? I mean, those might be the real answers, but the signal that you want to send should be focused on kind of what's in it for the person you're talking about. So if without going too far into the weeds on those specifics, I think the key here is to address the question honestly, but try to, I'm going to use a word that may be a little controversial, spin it in a way that goes back to what you like about the company, what you like about the opportunity, what you like about the person you're interviewing with. You can be honest, but also send a signal of, hey, this is, not about the jerk that I work for today. This is about you, and you're going to be awesome, right? So what are your thoughts about that, Kelly? Again, I think we could get way off into the weeds if we're not careful here, but what are your what are your takeaways on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Talk about the opportunity, connect why you're interested in the role and how you're a good fit, and put the focus on the company. Because to Scotty's point, you can easily get sidetracked, waste time on the past. You shouldn't be going there. You're talking about your future with this company. So head that direction.
Love it. That's great. Okay, cool. And I will just say, for me personally, again, the whole purpose of what we're doing today is this is hopefully going to be a resource for people in the future when you're thinking about, a job interview that you have and you want to go to the next level with some advanced interview prep. But if you've listened to this and you still have some questions about some specifics, feel free to reach out to me directly. You can do that via LinkedIn, of course. Here we are, right? Okay. Moving on to the next one, still thinking about signals. So not just the way you answer questions, but also I'd say arguably more important, the questions that you ask will send signals to the person that you're speaking with. So we talked earlier at the very top of this live about asking your interviewer if they have a hard stop in the allotted time, right? Whatever's scheduled. So depending on what they said and depending on the amount of time that you have for your questions, often it's going to be like the last 5 minutes of a scheduled interview. You want to triage questions that are most important. And here's a question that I think is absolutely mandatory. If you've ever been the person who says, no, I think I'm good, I don't have any questions,
don't do it.
Moving forward, exactly. Moving forward, at minimum, you need to ask this question. And that is, what hesitations, if any, do you have about moving me forward to the next step in this process? Because you want to be able to address those in real time. You also get a chance to hear about what next steps in the process are going to be. What are your thoughts on that question? And I've got some others too, I think are important, but what were your thoughts on that question right there, Kelly?
Absolutely. It gives you the opportunity to answer those concerns because you may have had it prepared, but you just didn't get to it in the conversation. So at that point, the interviewer is sharing, hey, this is an area that's, important, but I didn't see it in our conversation or whatever the case may be, but it's definitely an opportunity for you to then share your example, your strength, what you came prepared with.
No doubt. It's also an opportunity to clarify if they misunderstood something you said earlier in the conversation. Like you said, it's an opportunity to address something that, a gap that you didn't do a good enough job addressing, et cetera, et cetera. There's a million reasons why it's a good one to ask, but also again, sends a signal about who you are as a professional, when you ask that question. So if nothing else, it does that. Here's the one thing I'll say on top of it. You may not get an answer, right? Even if somebody does have hesitations, they may not feel comfortable telling you what those are. And they may say, oh, no, we're good, right? And you still end up getting declined after that meeting. That's possible. It happens. We, talked to a lot of people where it's happened to them. So just kind of level set your expectations, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't ask the question. You should absolutely ask the question. Couple of other questions. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, in that scenario, if they do say, hey, there's nothing there, take that time to reiterate why you're interested in that role and highlight your strengths. So your closing, I guess, you're selling yourself on why.
That's awesome. I love it. And again, the way we look at this is you've got to triage your questions. You have them prepared. You have them written down. That should be the very last question you ask. So again, if it's the only question you have time for, it's the one and only. But if you have time for more questions, that's the last one, right? Yeah. Here's some examples of additional questions that are great to ask in an interview because of the signal that it sends. So one of them is, what does good look like in this role? Like if Mr. Manager, Mr. Mrs. Manager, most likely Mrs. Manager, what's the ideal candidate look like to you? Another question, what are the expectations for success in this job in the first 30, 60, and 90 days? Again, two questions that are great. You want to know the answer to them. They also send signals about who you are as a professional, positive signals about who you are as a professional. Any others? I mean, we can go on and on here on this, but any that you think are super important to ask as well?
Yeah, similar to your 30, 60, 90, a really good common, I would say kind of more general is like, what are the high level objectives for this role as well? Because they may not have that specific. If they do, great.
Yeah, to your point, often job description won't actually have that in it, and it's something you want to know. But again, it sends a signal about who you are as a professional, if nothing else, right? Okay, just another pause for those of you who are joining us live. Thanks again for joining today. Kelly Sanchez, head of talent acquisition at DigiCert, and I are talking about what we consider advanced job interview preparation tips. You can only see like people come and go. So if you're just popping in, I will say like probably a good, thing to go back and watch from the beginning if you do need to prepare for an interview. But basically we're just going down a list of things that we think are not common knowledge or not, what you're going to find out there and under kind of basic interview tips. If you have questions about any of the things we've discussed, or if you have questions, generally speaking, for us, feel free to pop them into the comments section here on LinkedIn. Okay, just a couple of more, and then we'll wrap this thing up, Kelly. So now that we're kind of talking about questions you should ask, another tip, don't ask HR questions to the hiring manager. HR questions should be for HR. So what do I mean? Asking about PTO, asking about schedule, work from home. If you don't know, you should probably know, but any questions that you have that are related to, like, basically a question that could be answered by a recruiter or by somebody in HR. Compensation, it's another one. You don't want to waste valuable real estate when you're interviewing with the hiring manager asking those questions. You can get the answer to those questions from the recruiter. So reserve those questions for the recruiter. You need them answered at some point. It just doesn't need to be with the hiring manager. Any thoughts around that, Kelly?
Yeah, I agree with that. Keep your HR questions for a later time, not with the hiring manager.
Keep your HR questions with HR, right?
Yeah.
Okay. This one seems kind of straightforward, but I know a lot of people, in some ways, in my mind, take too much on faith when it comes to a job. Get your questions answered. If you go through the end of the interview process and you still have questions, there's no reason why you shouldn't ask, whether it's like asking the recruiter what the questions are, or for that matter, asking the recruiter if they'll help you schedule an additional meeting with the hiring manager specifically to cover some of your questions. You just need to get your questions answered. Don't take things on faith. Don't make assumptions. If you're wrong, this is a huge decision when you take a new job. You want to make sure you know what you're going into, eyes wide open as much as possible. Thoughts on that, Kelly?
Absolutely. If there's any doubt, absolutely reach out and get your questions asked so you have all the information needed to make the appropriate decision that's best for you.
Perfect. Okay. The last one here, and I'm sure there's some things that we missed. Again, for those of you watching, if you have comments on what we might have missed or questions around this topic, feel free to drop them into the comment section. But the last thing we have is to ask for help when you need it. So I'll give a couple of examples here where I think this is applicable. One is we've talked about preparation. We've talked about writing all these things down. Let's say you get a question that stumps you and you weren't prepared, and it's a question that's not something you can immediately answer. It's okay to tell the person that you're interviewing with, wow, I didn't prepare for that question specifically. It's a great one. May I have a minute to think about it?
Yes.
And just take the time. And silence often is awkward. We want to fill it, resist that temptation, and take the time you need to think. That's one example. The other example, and I think about this a lot from a technical perspective, when it's a software engineering position, for instance, and you've got a live coding exercise and it's a tough one and you're feeling stumped, ask the panel that you're interviewing with for help. Tell them, like, guys, this is a good one. This is one that I wasn't prepared for. How would you start? People think that that's like the wrong answer, but most positions, and especially most engineering positions, you're working in a team. Collaboration is critical. It's like probably a core value. So collaborate, ask for help. It actually signals that you are a team player and you're open to collaboration far more than just sitting there trying to gut it out on your own. Any other thoughts or scenarios where asking for help might make sense to you, Kelly?
I like that one. And that one is new for me. Scotty shared that one. And I think it's a great example of like in action of seeing what collaboration could be with that individual. So yeah, I like it.
Awesome. All right. Well, Kelly, I think that was the list for us. We've reached kind of our general time frame. We don't want it to be too long. Anything else that you thought of as we went through this list?
No, not at the moment, but I am with you, Scotty. If you guys have any questions or any follow-ups to this, definitely reach out to either of us. We're happy to connect and provide more guidance or, again, answer any questions that you may have. In addition to topics, like this is fun. I know Scotty's giving me a bunch of crap that is like semi-weekly, bi-weekly.
Semi-regular.
You know what I mean.
Yeah,
topics we're getting from you guys. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, to your point, Kelly, if you guys have topic ideas for us in the future, we'd love to see them. If you have questions for us, I didn't want to volunteer her. She's a busy lady, but she obviously is open to helping as well. And again, if you've made it through to the end of this and still have questions about any specifics or need some clarification on any of the things we've discussed, because you're trying to prepare for a big job interview, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to address them. Otherwise, we hope this has been useful. And yeah, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Kelly, thanks so much for joining as always.
Yeah, no, it's great. Okay. Bye, everyone.